Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the supreme being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth, and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the President.
Honorable Senators, I have granted leave of absence to Senator H.R. Ian Roach from today's sitting of the Senate. Honorable Senators, just before we enter this chamber, I had a meeting with the leaders of the three benches. And now I want to point out and remind all members of this chamber of Standing Order 4210, which sets out that a member shall not read his speech except in certain circumstances. Honorable Senators, we have all been in this chamber for 7 months now, and I'm hoping that we are a little more familiar in this debating environment. As is set out in Erskine May's Parliamentary Practice, the 24th edition, and I'm quoting here, the purpose of this rule is to maintain the cut and thrust of debate, which depends on successive speakers meeting in their speeches, to some extent, the arguments of earlier speeches. Debate is more than a series of set speeches prepared beforehand without reference to each other. And that's the end of the quote. Honorable Senators have also noticed from our last sitting that some 5 out of the 19 speakers asked for the use of the lectern. And the use of this lectern also tends to the danger of infringing against that standing order about reading speeches. And the use of the lectern is usually in heavy debates, such as the presentation of budgets and the reply to budget presentations by the minister and the leader of the opposition accordingly. So I would ask that we also try not to seek the use of this lectern.
Bills brought from the House of Representatives. As listed on the order paper, the Strategic Services Agency Amendment Bill 2016 in the name of the Attorney General. Papers.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in the name of the Minister of Finance. 1. The audited financial statement of Taurus Services Limited, Taurus, for the financial year ending September 30, 2014. The audited financial statements of Youth Training and Employment Partnership Program, YTEP Limited, for the financial year ending September 30, 2014. The audited financial statements of National Flour Mills Limited for the financial year ending December 31st, 2012, 2013, and 2014. The third report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Public Transport Service Corporation for the year ended December 31st, 2001. The second report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Public Transport Service Corporation for the year ended December 31st, 2002. The third report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Public Transport Service Corporation for the 9 months ended September 30th, 2003. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Public Transport Service Corporation for the year ended September 30th, 2004 and 2005, the Customs Amendment of the First Schedule Order 2016, and finally, the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Order 2016.
Questions on notice? Questions for oral answer?
Senator Mark.
No, yes, a minute. Madam President, the government will be answering all questions, save and except question number 36 to the Minister of Finance and question number 52 to the Prime Minister, and we seek your deferral for 2 weeks.
Senator Mark.
Thank you, Madam President. Question number 34 to the Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam
Honorable
President.
Minister of Health.
Madam President, before I begin, I want to just welcome the Form 4 students of Naparima Girls High School to this chamber, their principal and their form teacher. Since assuming office, the Ministry of Health has collaborated with the Global Medical Response of Trinidad and Tobago, GMRTT, to effectively resolve the myriad of issues that adversely affected the performance of the emergency ambulance service. Previously, when an ambulance arrived at a public health institution with a patient, it required on average greater than 40 minutes to transfer the care and custody of the patient to receiving facility personnel. In many cases, this process exceeded 1 hour, and in extreme cases, the process endured for several hours. Today, Madam President, the average patient handover time ranges from 15 to 20 minutes and continues to improve as evidenced by data generated by a time and motion study piloted at the San Fernando General Hospital in March 2016. To effect the improvement, it is noted that the Ministry of Health provisioned substantial numbers of hospital stretchers to receiving health facilities, eliminating the need for the patient to remain on the ambulance stretcher and allowing for timely patient handover. Additionally, and perhaps more importantly, is the collaborative spirit of the GMRTT and the respective RHAs to put the needs of the patient first and to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of emergency health care. Through collaboration, procedures at all health institutions have been streamlined to ensure ambulance patients are properly and efficiently triaged and placed in an appropriate treatment queue. The counterparts of the RHAs have worked with GMRTT to extract ambulance personnel from the patient registration process and to clear ambulance equipment and personnel to be ready for the next citizen medical emergency. As a result, Madam President, ambulance response times to all emergencies have been reduced by 25% in March 2016 as compared to the previous period. The improvements in productivity are equivalent to adding 3 ambulances every day and night to improve service to the public. Additionally, the supervisors at GMRTT were given phone access to both the head of emergency department and the manager emergency department in case an ambulance is kept longer than 20 minutes. Again, Madam President, this measure was instituted to improve overall response time of the ambulance service. Thank you for the opportunity.
Senator Mark.
Yes, I thank you very much, Madam President. Could the Honorable Minister of Health indicate to this Honorable House what system of monitoring and assessment have you put in place to ensure that this new arrangement, whereby it takes 15 to 20 minutes for an ambulance to arrive, pick up a patient, and take that patient to the general hospital or whichever facility? What mechanisms of monitoring you have in place to ensure that does not go back to the old period?
Well, the old period you are referring to are the dark days of 2010 to 2015. And we have no intention, absolutely none, to going back to that dark period where you and your government could not fix the ambulance service. What we have done is instituted a simple system of handover where people document and sign off for receiving and dispatching. And I will guarantee you, Senator Mark, we are not going back to those dark days of 2010 and 2015. Very dark indeed. Very, very dark.
Madam President, my friend, I can only say my friend. Madam President, could the Honourable Minister indicate whether he is satisfied with the number of ambulances currently in the service involving the GMRTT, given, for instance, the need to ensure that the system is adequately and effectively executed?
I really appreciate the revised tone of your supplemental questions, and I'll respond in kind. We are adhering to the contract between GMRTT and the Ministry of Health, a contract which the last administration paid absolutely no attention to. There's this feeling that the deficiencies in the ambulance service was only the fault of GMRTT. On becoming Minister of Health, I noticed upon reading the contract that both parties, the Ministry of Health and GMRTT, were both not adhering to the terms. What we have done from our end is the additional stretchers to conform to the contract terms and conditions, and we are also holding GMRTT to their end of the bargain, where they will have to provide new ambulances. So the solution was a collaborative solution, and it lay in both parties coming together under an administration which paid attention to the issues surrounding poor people.
Senator Mark.
Can I ask the Honourable Minister, how many new ambulances, given the contractual arrangements between the government and GMRTT, are expected to get into the service stream within the next year, as an example, Madam President?
I really congratulate the member on his tone again. Excellent tone, I love it. The terms of the contract, it's a pity you did not ask me in that question, but I can get it for you, and I can give it to you personally by phone or text. But I don't have that information here right now, and I would not like to mislead you and or the public.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Senator Mark.
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam President. To the distinguished and honorable Attorney General, question number 35.
Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that graciousness is not lost at all in this august House, and I too recognize the most capable debating team that often arrives from Naparima Girls, if I may be permitted. Not that they are the team, but that they host some of the best. Welcome all. Madam President, the question is phrased with respect to the Anti-Money Laundering and Financing of Terrorism Act. Regrettably, there is no such law in Trinidad and Tobago. However, I've taken the opportunity to address it. Perhaps that was just a misstatement in the following fashion. There are two key pieces of legislation that would be relevant to persons who have been proven to be linked to ISIL and wish to return to this country. These are the Anti-Terrorism Act, Chapter 1207, and the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127. I'd note at this juncture that the powers of the Attorney General under the legislation are restricted to Sections 22B, 36, and 37 of the Anti-Terrorism Act. But other key legislative tools under these two acts are available to the constitutionally independent office holder, that being the Director of Public Prosecutions and, of course, the judiciary. Accordingly, where someone is proved to be linked to ISIL, this government will invoke the provisions of the law that are within the discretion of the executive to apply, regardless of whether the person has already left the country or whether they wish to return. In such circumstances as described in this question, Section 22B of the Anti-Terrorism Act will be invoked. Section 22B(1) allows the Attorney General to apply to a judge for an order under Section 22B(3) to designate an individual or an entity as a listed entity for the purposes of the Act and to freeze assets. Section 22B(1)(2) allows such application to be made in respect of entities or individuals where there are reasonable grounds to believe that the entity or individual is knowingly acting on behalf of, at the direction of, or in association with an entity designated as a terrorist entity by the United Nations Security Council. Madam President, the United Nations Security Council has so designated ISIL. Madam President, we're in fact building on the momentum already gained by this government. While Section 22B was available to the last administration, it took this government to begin implementing it. The Attorney General's Office has successfully invoked Section 22B in the first ever such application to the High Court regarding one Kareem Ibrahim. The application was filed on November 24th, 2015, and the order under Section 22B3 was granted on December 3rd, 2015, listing Ibrahim and freezing his assets. The guidance of the court in this matter will now greatly assist the state in charting a course for the various types of applications to be made under Section 22B. Section 36(1) of the Anti-Terrorism Act allows the DPP to apply ex parte to a judge for an order for the restraint of property that may ultimately be made the subject of a forfeiture order under Section 37. Section 36(2) provides that upon such an application under Section 36(1), the Attorney General may request that the judge appoint a person to take control of and manage or otherwise deal with the whole or part of the property in accordance with the directions of the judge, or B, require any person having possession of the property to give possession thereof to the person appointed under paragraph A. Section 37 allows the Attorney General to apply to a judge for an order of forfeiture with respect to terrorist property as defined in the Act. While the subject matter of Section 22B is an individual or entity, Sections 36 and 37 focus on terrorist property. These powers under 36 and 37 will therefore also be applied where the circumstances so dictate, Madam President. I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, may I ask the Honorable Attorney General, given the fact that from reports in the press, there are hundreds of Trinidad and Tobago citizens who are fighting for ISIL on the fronts, on various fronts in the Middle East, and from also press reports, several of them have returned home having served their contract. I would like to ask the Attorney General whether his office and the security services are monitoring those persons who have returned to the country, and whether he has seen it necessary thus far to invoke under the Anti-Terrorism Act Section 22B1 as it relates to those returning fighters of Trinidad and Tobago descent who have returned to these shores thus far.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I'd like to put into the public record that there is no information that there are hundreds of people involved as foreign terrorist fighters who are Trinidadians or Tobagonians involved in other territories. There may be anecdotal information, but we must be driven by evidence. What I can say with certainty is that the matter of foreign terrorist fighters is being addressed with all seriousness by all security apparatus, both in Trinidad and Tobago and with our international partners, particularly with foreign states, but individually and through Europol and Interpol. That has led to the monitoring of a number of persons in a very active and real-time circumstance. And I'm very pleased to say that the anti-terrorism desk, which the Office of the Attorney General has now in operation in coordination with the Ministry of National Security, is very active, and we are about to approach the court in relation to a number of persons for Section 22B designations. Obviously, we can't go into the details of these things, but suffice it to say, the country deserves action and enforcement, and that is exactly what we intend to deliver.
Madam President, through you, if the Attorney General could share with us, based on the evidence before you, what is the precise number of nationals who are currently fighting with ISIL in the Middle East at this time? And would you want to probably let us know, in those circumstances, the threat to the state of TNT that returning nationals pose from your perspective?
Madam President, matters of national security must be treated with very carefully. A precise number is an incapability. Firstly, because one relies upon anecdotal information, usually originating from a different country, where the information has to be specifically verified. In the Office of the Attorney General, one must be careful to balance the rights of the individual against wild allegations, but also to safeguard the public interest and to treat with matters seriously. Most regrettably, I would not be in a position to supply a number to the Parliament. Suffice it to say, however, that this is a multi-dimensional treatment that is being applied. And what I can say is that we are in fact approaching the issue of foreign terrorist fighters or persons alleged to be by separate standalone legislation as well, which will be coming to the Parliament very shortly. The international cooperation factor cannot be discounted. One cannot have precise information about who is in Syria or Iraq or otherwise unless somebody tells you that somebody is there. So we must treat with circumstantial information and the road towards evidence with great care and caution.
Madam President, is the Attorney General willing to share with us at this time whether the government is contemplating bringing to this honorable House new legislation that, like Australia, would deny those persons citizenship who have left this country to fight with ISIL in the Middle East, like, as I said, has happened in Australia? Is the government of Trinidad and Tobago looking at the possibility of making those persons non-citizens and make it very difficult for them to return to the Republic of TNT after their contracts have expired in the Middle East under ISIL?
Madam President, what I can say is that the government is looking at the issue of foreign returning terrorists. The Southeast Asian Pacific region has brought forward a lot of very interesting legislation which we have looked at. Malaysia is particularly persuasive in the type of treatment that they give, because as a territory and as a state, we have to not only manage the application of anti-terrorism laws, which we are doing and which we have demonstrated we are doing, but we must be careful to treat with the issue of statelessness, because when one creates, by way of rejection of citizenship, someone who is deemed to be stateless, on the Western hemispherical content, you have to factor how you're going to treat with the persons who become stateless. Our international partners are not persuaded, as Southeast Asia or Pacific countries have been, to create a concept of statelessness, because the question is going to be, who is going to receive the person who is stateless? What is interesting and important is to treat with the terrorist threat and to apply the laws. We have very robust laws and we have very robust partners, and we are together in a very tight coordination to make sure that we eradicate terrorism and the financing of terrorism. We uphold United Nations Resolution 1278 wholeheartedly, and we're driving the process.
Senator Ali.
Thank you, Madam. Is the Attorney General aware that a number of terrorists, it is alleged anyway, but I've been told it's reliably informed, I've been reliably informed, that a number of terrorists travel to Venezuela and return to Trinidad not through the regular means, but through the porous borders that we have down in CGS and those areas? Are you aware of that?
I would answer by saying that the National Security Council, through the various entities that operate there, are tracking all issues specifically. We are aware that porous borders create significant problems for us as a country, be it in relation to allegations of persons who are terrorists, be it in relation to the importation of guns, narcotics, trafficking in persons, etc. And what we have done is to broaden a very deep link with the government of Venezuela, the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela, where we are sharing intelligence and manning the border patrolling as a unified approach, and that we have, as a matter of fact, up to yesterday, the Minister of National Security and I, both in addressing the this hemispherical Defense Council conference, which was held under the auspices of the Minister of National Security here in Trinidad, again repeated the call to countries such as Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil. We were faced with a very interesting question by the Brazilian commander. Why would Trinidad and Tobago give up its offshore patrol vessels, which the Brazilian Navy is now flying under the name Trinidad-class BAE systems? They found it astounding that we as a country would have given up vessels to protect our maritime Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 defense positions. And they asked for an answer from me as Attorney General, what would possess a country such as Trinidad and Tobago to give up class vessels such as BAE systems sold to them and which they have in active fleet operation and leave our borders unprotected?
What did you tell them?
I told them that that was something that had to be addressed to the last government, but suffice it to say, the point is we have purchased and put into effect maritime vessels which cost Trinidad and Tobago the same amount as vessels 10 times the size, but nonetheless we've put into operation. I thank you.
Senator Amin.
Question number 51 to the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you, Madam President. At this time, the government has no intention to sell the Aripo livestock farm to a private individual.
Madam President, may I? Could the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries indicate at what time or at which time in the near future does the government intend to dispose of the Aripo livestock farm?
No, before the minister rises, that's not arising from the question.
No, he said at
that's
this time.
not arising from the question posed or answered.
No, here. Madam, if I may. Madam?
No. Any further supplementary?
Considering the Minister's answer, Madam President, I know that he indicated that the government doesn't have any intention at this time, and I want to ask if you have any plans in the future that you are aware of for the government to dispose of the Aripo farm.
No, Honorable Minister, Senator
Arising out
Amin.
of his answer.
Senator Amin, no. Let us move on. Are there any other supplementals? Senator Amin, the next question.
Question 53 to the Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, may you permit me to also acknowledge the presence of the principal, teachers, and students of Naparima Girls High School. Madam President, honorable members, I wish to advise that this matter is currently before the court, and therefore we must be responsible to ensure that no statements are made to prejudice the legal process. I'm permitted to say, however, that 14-year-old Darian Ned was murdered around 12:35 a.m. on Sunday, the 20th of March, 2016. This matter is, as all matters such as this type, is being managed by the investigative and prosecutorial arms of the state. I'm advised by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that several persons were interviewed by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, following which 3 persons were detained. 1 person was subsequently charged on Sunday, the 27th of March, 2016, for the murder of Darian Ned. Madam President.
Madam President, the question didn't pertain so much as to the murder of the, in terms of finding the murderer, but with regards to steps that were taken, given that he was indicated, it was public knowledge that he was a witness in a crime and so on. So it speaks to the question of protecting state witnesses and witnesses to crime and the families of these witnesses. So I don't know if the minister could perhaps share some information with regards to that.
Honorable Minister.
Madam President, I repeat that the matter is before the court, and therefore answers such as that could prejudice the case, Madam President.
Madam President, if I may, the only person in this parliament that I know could determine these things would be yourself. And I don't think it's fair for a minister, in responding to a question, to simply invoke the sub judice rule, and you have not ruled on the matter. You know, even minister could tell this parliament in those circumstances, at what level or stage is this particular matter? Is it not because it is before the court? You don't answer. So I would like to have your intervention and ruling on this matter.
As I understand, the Minister of National Security, he is actually saying that in the interest of national security and in the interest of this particular matter, someone has been charged, and he does not want at this stage to be talking about the incidents that led up to the murder. That's my interpretation, and he's within his right to give that answer.
Public business, private members' business, motions.
Before I call on Senator Ramkissoon, let me just say that there has been agreement pursuant to Standing Order 117 for how this debate will be conducted. There will be 4 speakers altogether. Agreement has been reached among the benches. There will be the mover of the motion and 3 other speakers. I also want to join with everyone else in the chamber in welcoming the students from Naparima Girls High School, Zambia. Senator Ramkissoon.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas the limitless use of technology creates avenues for its abuse and for various types of cybercrimes, including cyberbullying, which can harm our citizens, and whereas the laws of Trinidad and Tobago have not to date addressed the issue of the regulation of such cyber activity, be it resolved that the Senate call upon the government to quickly close the gaps in our legislation in relation to penalties for the abuse and negative usage of computers, mobile devices, and internet technology. Madam President, as I kick off today's debate,
No, you go.
No, I have to go ahead. Okay, yeah. Okay, yes. Okay, as I rise to kick off today's debate, I seek to challenge the Parliament on a motion of boundless interest that impacts our present and future communicative paths. Madam President, we the people of Trinidad and Tobago demands now as a regular, everyday service. We share photos online instantly with our friends worldwide. Of a click of a button, we can have a video conferencing with any business partner throughout the world. So this transition from delivery time of weeks to immediate exposes major gaps in our policy and legal system. However, Madam President, people abuse the same technology to commit cyber crimes. Allow me to share with the Senate a definition from Interpol International about cybercrime. And cybercrime is a fast-growing area of crime. More and more criminals are exploiting the speed, convenience, and secrecy of the internet to commit a diverse range of criminal activities that know no borders, either physical or virtual, cause serious harm and pose real threats to victims worldwide. Madam President, crime and education is on our top of our agenda in Trinidad and Tobago, where national security has been allocated approximately $0.8 billion, and education and training have been allocated approximately $10 billion of our nation's budget. So this motion is pinnacle in our core attention of our country's safety, as our country's and nation's safety is a shared responsibility. In the words of Nelson Mandela, who said, "Education is the most powerful weapon for changing the world." If we want to use this powerful weapon, how do we then set such an environment to stimulate and achieve such powerful world changes? According to our country, Trinidad and Tobago National School Code of Conduct, which was last updated in May 2009, it states that schools are a setting for all children and youth to learn and develop holistically. It should be a place that promotes the values of responsibility, respect, civility, academic excellence in a safe learning and teaching environment, as well as promotes equity, justice, and fairness. Before I go on to see if this is existing in our present school situation, Madam President, please allow me a few minutes to acknowledge the instigators of this motion. It is such a proud moment for me to highlight work done by our very own brilliant young minds. One group is from my past high school, Naparima Girls High School, and I'm quite proud of their persistence and willingness for change. I urge you all to reflect upon our very first sitting of the 11th Parliament, where His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, in his feature address, arose in our minds and commended the girls on raising the awareness of our lapse in legislation in relation to cybercrimes. Personally, I expect nothing less from these young ladies, as our school motto says, not for ourselves only, but for others. And this is truly demonstrated in their hard work thus far. So the Form 3 students who are now in Form 4 took part in the RBC 2014-2015 Young Leaders Project and embarked on a mission to educate the public on cyberbullying, cyberstalking, and catfishing, and its negative impacts on our society. So, Madam President, as they are here with us today, please allow me to publicly acknowledge the President of the project, Ms. Rebecca Ann Jatton, the Vice Project President, Ms. Alvia Mir, the Creative Committee, the Documentation Committee, their form teacher, Ms. Nanku, and the present principal, Mrs. Gosain, for their commendable work and effort in this piece of motion. So thank you. I would secondly like to highlight the Point Fortin Roman Catholic Primary School that held a school walk through the streets of Point Fortin to raise awareness of bullying and a cry for persons to stop bullying and violence in schools, as they pray for mercy on Trinidad and Tobago. Over 700 persons came out to support this cause and this work, and that is also commendable. Now, many groups throughout Trinidad and Tobago have been setting up groups and trying to save our country, as to put it nicely, a little at a time, in their own community, in their own way. And we must acknowledge the good work that is going this way. So, Madam President, as we see more and more persons bringing awareness of violence in schools, this issue that I'm raising before the Parliament today is of critical importance, as it not only affects our youths by the uses of social media, but it affects and impacts all. For example, people who post their resumes online with all their personal information in hope of getting a job. The persons who may be even working with a childhood bully, and they may even not have learned how to speak up or speak out for themselves. And this is why I'm very passionate about this private motion, as it's not for some, but it is definitely for all. Madam President, cyber crimes have serious, sometimes fatal effects on victims. Let's not disappoint our future leaders, our youths, the ones our today decisions will impact. I urge all members listening, do your own research into this motion, and I urge the government to understand the priority to update our legislation to protect all from the abuse of technology, as we have embraced technology in our homes, our pockets, and definitely in our everyday routine. Madam President, these young ladies even went a step further, where they set up an online petition to demand the amendment of legislation which was signed by approximately 4,000 persons. This method of highlighting things to the Parliament is not a stranger to the UK system, where the UK has online petitions which is used by the Parliament to get the public more involved. They have even ventured into a cyber chamber to have up-to-date live interaction with their public. And these are truly game changers and positive usage of digital technology to engage the public. I encourage our Parliament to use such e-petitions where motions are tracking over 1,000 persons can reach a committee stage to highlight work that the Parliament should be working on and which of vital interest to the public. So, Madam President, this is not simple because this activity also needs protection, as we can't have a petition being raised by an activist group who feel driven and passionate about causing harm and bringing about public humiliation, or an immature, non-social individual who hides behind the cloak of the internet. The internet, as defined, is the most important single development in the history of human communication. It is quite simple to say, to solve this, let's just take away the internet from the children. Take away the internet, we would not have cyberbullying, we will not have cyber stalking, we will not have hackers if we just take them away from the internet. To those persons who say, take away the internet, I simply say, don't sleep so the nightmares will stop. If you expect persons not to react, or you tell a young child, don't fall asleep so you won't have bad dreams, that is both impractical and impossible to do. Because digital technology is pivotal to the progression of our society to achieve a holistic society. Digital technology is the vehicle of change that will help our society achieve its development goals regarding health, education, socialization, and even business environments. Technology can change our culture. It can change how cities progress. It can even attract persons to your country. So, Madam President, permit me to lay before the Senate evidence to reveal the high threats posed by not having proper laws to counter the crimes and abuse committed by users who shield under the secrecy of the internet cloak. Now, there are various types of cyber crimes out there. And I would like to urge the government to not try to address every piece of cybercrime in one piece of legislation. I would suggest that they risk rank the threats and apply it to the society in which we live in today. Because, as for example, you might want to look at cyber terrorism and anti-terrorism act together. Or you might want to look at cyberbullying and bullying and violence in school in one piece of legislation. So do not lump it all. I would suggest we look at it separately and where it is applicable. For the purpose of this debate, I would like to focus my time remaining on cyberbullying and cyber terrorism in our country. And I would like to just share a saying that was taken from Ms. Lynette Mather. What if the kid you bullied at school grew up to be the only surgeon to save your life? What would you do? Now we need to understand, what do we class as cyberbullying? Cyberbullying is when you torment, threaten, harass, humiliate, and embarrass someone by the use of an interactive and digital technology. Unfortunately, only 1 in 10 victims will ever report they have been bullied. And this is very sad, because then we don't have proper statistics available to know the real threats of cyberbullying in our nation today. Now, many may have grown up with the saying or the era, "Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me." Now, this is a popular local saying, and unfortunately in today's society it's quite a false saying, because it teaches you to stand up and be strong for yourself, to stand up against your bully, to stand up against your enemy, to be strong. And that is why in our society, when a child who is being bullied and reported to the teacher, it is normally the teacher who moves the victim from the class, transfers the victim, the child who reported being bullied, to another class, than having transferred the bully himself or herself. So in this society, when we are talking about the next stage of violence in a school, which is cyberbullying, how do we deal with this? Because we're dealing with a bully without a face. How do we stand up? How do we defend ourselves, as it not only exists in school or in your safe haven, but it now exists in your home? Cyberbullying no longer exists in the schoolyard, it follows you home. So it exists beyond the schoolyard. I would like to share with the listening audience and the Senate, Madam President, a case study in the US, which was highlighted on multiple medias. And I would like to draw your attention to Miss Megan Meyer, who was not yet 14 years old. And she had every teenager wants to be part of the social media, have an account. So she asked her parents to create a MySpace account. After much deliberation, her parents decided, yes, under watchful vigilance, we will allow you to create a MySpace account. After creating such an account, she got a friend request from Josh Evans. Not a problem. They chatted over probably 6 weeks. Unfortunately, October 15, 2006, Megan received a puzzling message from Josh saying, "I don't know if I want to be friends with you anymore because I heard that you are not nice to your friends." Strange. It went on and unfortunately escalated to a message being sent by Josh saying, "The world will be a better place without you." Later, unfortunately, as all classmates always knows what's going on with another classmate, it hit multiple media platforms of social media, and she was now being called numerous names for being dumped. Her size came into play, and all things mean that they could have possibly thought of, they posted. This unfortunately led to the suicide of Miss Megan Meyer. The day after her suicide, investigations into who is this Josh Evans led to it being a fake account that was immediately deleted after her suicide. Later, investigations revealed that this fake account was a parent who created this account to embarrass Megan and to befriend her and put up these things to discredit her. Now, unfortunately, in that state, there was no legislation in relation to cyber activity and cyber crimes, and nothing was done, and no one was charged. In the UK, Madam President, this also exists, because at least 16 children kill themselves each year because of being bullied at school. 16 children every year. Now, we might think, okay, this only exists in the US or the UK. And I'm unfortunately to say, do not be fooled. This also exists in Trinidad and Tobago. As posted on the Newsday 20th November 2010, headlines, bullying can lead to suicide. Trinidad Express, April 25, 2013, reported by a digital forensic expert, Corporal Joseph, at the Police Service Cybercrime Unit. For the period between 2012 and 2013, there were 30 cases of cyberbullying in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, we must be aware that bullying did not happen in this decade or this century. It has always existed, just different forms. And even from doing my research, I came across quite an interesting research paper that was entitled Bullying, Mental Health, and Parental Involvement Amongst Adolescents in the Caribbean, and was published in 2012. This article, this research paper, showed statistical evidence of Trinidad and Tobago in 2007. I would like to just share the information that I found. They looked at a sample size of 2,920 children in Trinidad and Tobago. They looked at different ages, boys and girls. It was found that more girls were bullied, with 23.2% of the sample size and 19.4% being boys who were bullied. But what was amazing to me, or alarming, was of that sample size, 30% were under 12 years old. Now, under 12 years old, well, I remember my days, we are very fearless. We are very open to the world out there. We do not want to instill fear into the minds of our under 12-year-old children. And that is what a bully is trying to do, inflict pain and fear to overcome or succumb their victims. The study even went on to prove the association between bullying, victimization, and poor mental health issues. And I mean poor mental health issues such as suicidal thoughts, loneliness, insomnia, sadness, hopelessness were strongly related. Now, I don't know, we do not expect to have our under 12-year-olds to be feeling this kind of mental instability. And I've heard the argument about cyber legislation or cyber activity that, you know, it's an infringement of freedom of your speech or freedom of your rights. And I say to those who speak up about freedom of speech, freedom of speech should never be used to hurt another human being. If so much bitterness needs to exist in one individual and you want to spread such behaviors through the freedom of online blogs, chat rooms, social networks with the sole intention of destroying another individual life, we, the Parliament, are left with no choice but to legislate against such crimes and to allow the courts the authority to prevent such irresponsibility. Now, many might think why we even have the thought of bullies in our country. Why would somebody want to be a bully? And it was quite interesting. Yes, we know the simple thing. They have power to attain your lunch money. Well, we heard in a recent committee stage where they had taxing and you get little possessions of the student. But there was something more than that. A 2011 journal that was published on criminal and civil confinement published a study that was done by the University of Virginia. And it had about 400 middle school students that was part of the research team or the survey size. And it found that bullies were overwhelmingly more popular than the other children in the class. So if you're a good child and you have made A's and you're obedient to your teachers, you were just not as popular as the bully, who's quite the opposite. So this problem runs deeper than media usage. due to the anonymous protection persons use to vent their hate with inappropriate and caustic terms via the use of blogs, Facebook posts, Twitter, emails, text messages. We must remember, Madam President, cyberbullies are respecter of no person. They do as they want and they do as they feel because they feel they are protected by the secrecy of the internet. Now, bullies can even be considered similar to our minor offenders or our criminals, as they do the same. They try to inflict fear into the societies living in the community. So no longer you're allowed to walk past a certain house because you have fear that you might get shot, you might get robbed, or you might get stabbed. Same thing the bullies are trying to do. They're trying to inflict fear into their victims. So do not think that it's only because you're a young person that you are a victim of cyberbullying or cybercrime. We parliamentarians have also been victims of cybercrimes. You may ask how? False stories posted online in hope of character defamation, disgraceful slandering of public image, rumor spreading, name calling. I think the most recent case we had publicly known was the case with the Honorable Minister of Finance, where his Facebook account was allegedly hacked and very intolerable comments were posted online. So yes, we are stronger than collapsing under a fake picture or fake profile account or maybe a notorious quote. We are stronger. But what are the effects of cyberbullying on teenagers, young adults, our under 12? Some studies show self-harm, lower self-esteem, suicidal thoughts, increased psychological, emotional, and physical stress. Being a teenager is never an easy time. It's a transition period in your life. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be both. Now, to add such psychological trauma to a child's life or to a young mind, what are we trying to create in Trinidad and Tobago? Are we trying to create criminal minds? I heard in this very same Senate where Senator Hadid raised or highlighted some graffiti he saw posted on a wall while driving by. Join a gang, it's better than a family. The mind is a powerful tool. What is the message we are trying to share with the public? What do we want to be remembered by and for? I find Romans 7:19 puts it quite nicely. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. We keep repeating things that we do not want for ourselves. So, Madam President, we are not alone in this piece of cyber crimes and cyber activities in this world. The US actually has 49 states that has a piece of legislation for cyber activity. And of that 49, 35 of the states have legislation directly related with cyberbullying. Now, Trinidad and Tobago has not been unable to step up. We, our past leaders and politicians, have attempted to solve cyber crimes. I ask you to reflect on the 2011 Commonwealth Cybercrime Initiative, which was intended to assist developing Commonwealth countries such as ours to build their institutional, human, and technical capabilities with respect to policy, legislation, regulation, investigation, and law enforcement, with the aim of making their jurisdictions more secure from cyber criminals. Now, this is very applaudable because it would be nice to have a listing of all the cyber crimes or the cyber criminals out there in the Commonwealth and share this information throughout so we could have a list to know who to be mindful for, or what system or what virus to look out for, what is going to be coming to Trinidad and Tobago. So this is very commendable, and I hope we continue in that initiative. Now, Madam President, we need to care for the youth, the children, as they follow us, and we have to protect their minds and the environment in which they live. We should not neglect them, disrespect their decisions, because their decisions are a clear reflection of us. When we hear of a teenager who has committed a murder, that is a reflection of his community. Now, I say that with reservation, because if you look at the 2009 National School Code of Conduct, which is online for all to access and read, it speaks about the community's responsibility. And it says that it's maintaining a standard of conduct that fosters appropriate behavior, cooperating with the minister or the Ministry of Education and the school personnel in the enforcement of school expectations, guidelines, rules, and regulations, providing educational and recreational opportunities to allow for the development of appropriate student behavior. And all of this is in our regulations for schools. Now, I would like to share an African proverb with you that says, it takes a whole village to raise a child. Now, unfortunately, this saying no longer is applicable. Unfortunately, because the same community no longer shares a common view. We no longer go to the same school, community school. We no longer go to the same community bazaar. We don't all have the same view on religion, politics, or even we don't have the same educational views. And that's because we no longer live in that era. So here's the National School Code of Conduct, speaking about community responsibilities, and yet we do not have this core responsibility of the community anymore. So we need to know who is now responsible for children. So the parents now have the onus to be responsible for their children. So when they say that we have a good child, they have a good boy, a good girl, it's a clear reflection of his or her environment. So the television programs, the social media, even the media forecasts, all of those influence the child, even the public figures in public office that they hold and their behavior. It also is reflected there. So when we say no to corporal punishment, because parents are doing the discipline, I have to ask and wonder, why do we have students committing crimes? So this is my recommendation. Parents need to be held responsible for their child, and they should be heavily fined or detained until their child is reduced in the indiscipline demonstrated in the schools or in society. They need to be held responsible. Now, I now go back again to the National School Code of Conduct. There are many different consequences for your crime. If you breach the National Code of Conduct, your maximum offense is law enforcement, so you can go to jail. So I find it very strange that we are not enforcing the present regulations that we have in place. Because here I'm asking for amendment or a new legislation, but we're not even enforcing what we have presently. So to the days where schools were a place of education, where children were dreamers, or a place where you could believe you're an astronaut, an engineer, a lawyer. Now we have in our school system, which is hard for me to even come to terms with, drug addicts, drug traffickers, prostitutes, teenage mothers. I find it so difficult. So I have to now ask, we have counseling systems in place in schools, and that is being offered by the state or the Ministry of Education to deal with these different or errant children. So I have to ask, is it that we are counseling them by day and allowing gang warfare by night? Because if we are not holding the parents responsible when they go home, it is the same story. There will be no resolution. So the law needs to hold parents equally responsible for their children's crimes. And this also extends to teachers, healthcare providers, community service principles. Now, Madam President, it is difficult for any child to pay attention when you believe you'll be assaulted or attacked. So I need to find out if the Ministry of Education is not enforcing the National Code of Conduct, or is it the principals who are not reporting these scenarios or these cases to the ministry out of fear for losing funding of their school, or out of fear that nobody will just attend their school because parents will no longer want to send their child where there's a high prevalence of gang warfare or gang on drug abuse. So, Madam President, I do not support suspension or expulsion, but I do support community service or servicing of your school, as in janitorial services, removing graffiti from walls, painting a desk that you may have been vandalizing, painting a wall. These are things that will ensure that students understand what they have done and what they expect, what is the work to rectify what they have done. So I would like to recommend to the Parliament legislation be put in place where community service be a penalty, and the policy can be specific where service is done between the victim and the bully to ensure that they both develop skills through supervised sessions. Madam President, in the remaining time I have, I need to speak about cyber terrorism, and that is the new language of war. Cyber terrorism is defined as terrorist activities intended to corrupt vital computer systems. So yes, it is the new language of war. Just like how you would protect your country from war, you will have walls in place, you might have a navy system, you'll have your forts. Same way, you need to have infrastructure in place to protect your country from cyber terrorism. Madam President, let me share with you, cyber terrorists pose an enormous threat as computer viruses are being unleashed against banks, energy companies, and businesses worldwide. We need to protect ourselves just as we would protect ourselves from a physical attack. Digital technology has definitely changed the playing field, and in this case, it has changed the battlefield. Let me share with you, Madam President, the Global Politics and Strategic publication, which was May 2013, and it had an interesting article dated the 15th of August 2012, and it stated, the computer network of Saudi Aramco was struck by a self-replicating virus that infected as many as 30,000 of its Windows-based machines. Despite its vast resources as Saudi Arabia's national oil and gas firm, documents, spreadsheets, emails, files were replaced with an image of a burning American flag. Aramco took 2 weeks to recover from this damage. The New York Times published October 23, 2012, cyber attack on Saudi firm. U.S. sees Iran firing back. Again, the cyber terrorism between countries just from that. So we might say, okay, what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago? In 2015, December 28, The Guardian published, savers lose thousands in bank scam. During the Christmas season, almost 200 RBC customers were reported to have rampant cyber crimes. Widespread panic was reported, and a number of clients were impacted by the debit card skimming, and thousands of dollars was lost by these individuals. Later on, January 3, 2016, cyber criminals target local ATM, and that's published in The Guardian. And the article even had an interesting take on it where it had a security expert at a local commercial bank saying skimming attacks like the one that occurred in December 28th will happen again because ATMs are increasingly being targeted by cyber criminals who are increasingly sophisticated high-tech methods to empty the bank accounts of customers. Madam President, one of our greatest challenges is the brilliant minds that exist in our country. I believe earlier this year, there was a publication where Trinidadians were known to be the top paid by Facebook to come out with loopholes in the system or gaps in their present very high-tech secure system. So imagine that exists here. So it is going to be challenging for national security and for our legislation to keep up to date with these very brilliant minds, young people who are just keeping up to date with the technology that is existing out there. At this point, I would like to urge all members to keep the debates healthy and to highlight concerns or issues to prevent the hindrance of formulating a strong bill that can be laid before Parliament. This is very a critical issue for Trinidad and Tobago, and it's of high importance, not only today, but to the future generations. So I look forward to hearing from all members on how cybercrime has affected you, a loved one, and how we, a Parliament, can protect all. Investing in children and young adults starting from childhood and at all stages throughout their lives is an effective way to reduce violence, vicious intergeneration cycles of poverty, misconduct, and lawlessness. It is also wise to tackle the root cause of every problem. Madam President. Thank you. Madam President, to prevent persons from achieving their maximum potentials and fully participating in society, we need to safeguard their environment and what we can't see. Just because we can't see it, we cannot be ignorant to the fact that it exists. In this particular motion, it is important that people who are often seen as beneficiaries of development are engaged as active partners participating in all aspects of development. Through you, I invite each parliamentarian to understand and to show their commitment to this cause by not failing to put forward proactive measures that will not fail our society today. Let's be proactive. How much more innocent persons need to suffer for our negligence? We have not had a Megan in Trinidad and Tobago, and I do not want to read of a Megan while I sit in this parliament. So I plead today that this motion or this piece of legislation be placed on the government's agenda as a high priority, because I saw it as part of the legislation agenda. I do plead that it is given the attention that it is needed. So before I close, I want to end like how I started. And I want to say a special thank you to Mrs. Gomati Lakan and her staff for assisting me with my research data today. Also, I would like to thank the parliamentary staff for assisting me on ensuring that everything went as smooth as it could today. So, Madam President, let's leave no one behind. Stop the abuse of cyber crimes or stop the abuse of digital technology and ensure that we have a better tomorrow. So I beg to move.
Madam President, I am honored and I rise to second the motion of my colleague Senator Ramkissoon. At this time, I waive my right to speak as per the bench agreement. Thank you, Madam President.
The motion has been seconded by Senator Mahabir. Honourable Senators, I will now propose the question for debate. Whereas the limitless use of technology creates avenues for its abuse and for various types of cybercrimes, including cyberbullying, which can harm our citizens. And whereas the laws of Trinidad and Tobago have not, to date, addressed the issue of the regulation of such cyber activity, be it resolved that the Senate call upon the government to quickly close the gaps in our legislation in relation to penalties for the abuse and negative usage of computers, mobile devices, and internet technology. General.
Thank you, Madam President. It is very refreshing to be back in the Senate again, having spent several years amongst colleagues in the 10th Republican Parliament. May I begin by complimenting very wholeheartedly and warmly the mover of the motion, Senator Melissa Ramkissoon. It is a great initiative to not only bring matters of national importance to the fore, but to also agitate them in as high a forum as the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. So I wish to compliment her. I wish to say, Madam President, this motion, when I first read it, was such a wide and limitless motion itself that I was hard-pressed to try and find which way I wished to address the issue. However, the Honourable Senator has given some interesting marker points, and if I could, in summary, crystallize what I understood the call to be. One, take cognizance of the fact that this is a burning issue in society. Two, act with alacrity as a government in treating with necessary solutions to be provided. Three, don't be in search of a perfect product in one piece of legislation. Rather, focus on that which you can achieve and provide in particular attention to two but equally important issues. One being cyberbullying and the second one being cyber terrorism. That's as I understood the parameters of today's motion and what the call for justice is. And so, Madam President, I have to start where the Honourable Senator ended. She ended by saying, please, government, take heed of the importance of this issue and put it in priority. And I was very happy to hear the Honourable Senator acknowledge that she noticed that, first of all, there was a legislative agenda of a government. Dare I say, for the first time in 5 years, we've seen a legislative agenda. Senator Hadid, sorry?
Where are they? Where's your agenda?
The Honourable Senator Hadid has just asked, where is your agenda? Clearly, he's not that familiar with the technology available on the Parliament's website, because it's published on the Parliament's website for all to see. In any event, by way of assisting my learned colleague, Senator Hadid, who says it's not here, I anticipated that, so I've brought a copy with me, which is right here to assist those more anchored to paper than technology. And so I will just say in answer to my learned colleague, Senator Ramkissoon, that cybercrime bill features at number 3 on the list for this year. And it wasn't by mistake that it features at number 3. So it's here in paper, it's here virtually for those who are capable of accessing it that way. But the fact is, cybercrime doesn't exist in a vacuum. The government, on coming into office, saw it important to return the Parliament to some measure of discipline by publishing a legislative agenda specifically so that persons who have interest in various areas of the law could have an insight into what the Office of the Attorney General is doing, what's on deck, what the priorities may or may not be, and then to allow for an interplay and interaction so that we can move things as society demands. So it's a priority item for this government. It's published. We intend to come to Parliament very shortly to continue work that successive governments began. And let me explain what I mean by that. one must be very careful not to throw away good product purchased by the people of Trinidad and Tobago through expenditure of tax-paying dollars. In 2008, the 9th Republican Parliament saw under a PNM administration a very sharp and dedicated focus against cybercrime. In fact, the interministerial committees created by Cabinet, Note, and Minute happened under that government, and in 2008, there was an introduction into a sharp focus in this area by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service creating a cybercrime unit. That saw a coincidental birth come out of the very hard work put together by the Ministry of National Security, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Defense Act, international partners in an arrangement which is referred to as the Special Anti-Crime Unit of Trinidad and Tobago. I wish to put on record as well, coming after the 9th Republican Parliament, that the work in relation to cybercrime was continued by the last government, and specifically Senator Gary Griffith, as Minister of National Security, pioneered quite a bit of work in relation to that which he inherited from a previous government. So too do we, as an incoming government, intend to carry out the work that the people of Trinidad and Tobago need to have. And specifically, to bring to life solutions which occupied the national attention in relation to the Cybercrime Bill of 2014, which regrettably lapsed under the last government, and also the Cybercrime Bill of 2015, which was halted when the Media Association expressed concerns in relation to what appeared to them to be an intrusion on the freedom of the press, insofar as they thought that there would be a filter against the media or a stymieing of the media in expressing views for information which they quote-unquote received, but didn't necessarily want to say how they had received it. And there's legitimacy in that purpose. Suffice it to say, Senator Ramkissoon's submissions in relation to cybercrime in its two subsets that she focused on, cyber-terrorism and cyberbullying, requires indeed a reflection on what the current state of the law actually is. Because, Senator, I would like to, through the Honorable President, put it this way. We actually have robust laws in place right now to treat with both cybercrime as expressed in cyberterrorism and cyberbullying. And that's a fact. Because we have a range of remedies. Not that I say that we must hang our hat on what exists only. As you've heard, the government intends to prosecute the passage of a cybercrime bill. But the submission that I make right now is that we not only have laws, but the real problem is in fact how one operationalizes laws and gets the effect. And I wish to put my point forward this way. Let's look to the fact of cyber crime in this context. What are the laws in Trinidad and Tobago that articulate, that could lend some assistance to cybercrime in general? I did a cursory passage through the laws last night, having been told only very recently that I'd be required to respond to this motion, but I put it out this way. I came across, number one, the Computer Misuse Act 2000, the Telecommunications Act 2001, the Interception of Communications Act 2010, the Offences Against the Persons Act Chapter 1108, the Anti-Terrorism Act 2005 as amended 4 times, most recently in 2014, the Children's Act 2012, the Dangerous Drugs Act Chapter 1125, the Electronic Transfer of Funds Crime Act, Criminal Act 2008, the Evidence Act, the Extradition, Commonwealth and Foreign Territories Act 1985, the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, the Financial Intelligence Units Act 2009 as amended several times, the Proceeds of Crime Act 2009 again amended several times, the Trafficking in Persons Act 2011, the Data Protection Act 2011, the Electronic Transactions Act 2011, the Copyright Act, the Trademark Act, but importantly as well, the this SSA Act, which is a 1995A Act, which I won't get into in detail because I'd be guilty of the prescription against anticipation of a bill, it having been now laid in this Parliament, in this House today. But it was that act that has the operationalization for a lot of things, because I wish to prove my point that we have laws in existence that can treat with this by reference to two particular pieces of law. First, and then an overarching piece of law after. I wish to point members to the Offences Against the Person Amendment Harassment Act 2005, in particular Section 30A1A. For the purposes of this section, harassment of a person includes alarming the person or causing the person distress by engaging in a course of conduct such as A, Roman 4, making contact with the person, whether by gesture, directly, verbally, by telephone, computer, post, or in any other way. I pause there. Let's look at the Anti-Terrorism Act. And let's look specifically to what that says. The Anti-Terrorism Act, Chapter 1207, is a very interesting piece of legislation. The Act in Section 3 of the Act defines a terrorist act, and other aspects. And then in the next sections of the Act, it goes on to criminalize terrorism. But I wish members to reflect upon, in Section 2, the definition of a terrorist. Terrorist includes a person who, A, commits a terrorist act by any means, directly or indirectly, unlawfully, and willfully, participates as an accomplice, organizes, directs, contributes, etc., etc. A terrorist act means an act, whether committed in or outside of Trinidad and Tobago, which causes or is likely to cause loss of human life, serious bodily harm, damage to property, prejudice to national security in its multidimensional forms, compel a government, etc., etc. So by any means and anywhere. By any means includes by any means. So there we have two standalone pieces of law. One which deals with harassment, which includes bullying specifically, and one which deals with terrorism, which includes terrorism by any form, in any capacity. But there is merit in a revision and in encompassing an holistic experience, because cybercrime relates to two forms and categories. One, cybercrime refers to new offenses for new technology, which our laws don't currently have in the best form possible. The progression of the type of attack that one could have in phishing or in emails or in that form of inundation of unwanted material or offensive material or unlawful material. But secondly, it also includes the concept of old or well-known crimes like harassment or new crimes like terrorism, which are features of the law, whether by statute, by criminal law, and even under the civil law, insofar as a breach of confidence has now morphed itself under equitable jurisdiction for inclusion. So it has two features: new aspects of the law and aspects of the law which are well known to us but are committed on computer networks or computer systems locally or otherwise. But we also have available to us the Computer Misuse Act. And the Computer Misuse Act of 2000, Act number 86 of 2000, is a very interesting piece of law. The Computer Misuse Act has, as a broad definition, which I commend to all members, a very useful definition of what a computer is, what a computer service is, what damage is, what interception is, as is the term intercept used there. And then it criminalizes any form of access, any form of unlawful receipt, any form of distribution where no consent is provided. But it's pegged to the concept of damage on one side of that piece of architecture, but wide open is the concept of use of unlawful information. And it doesn't matter whether you had permission to access it. If you gave it without consent, you're caught by an offense. If you received it and didn't know that consent was required, you're caught by an offense. If you're caught in between, you're caught by an offense. So, harassment under existing law is a fact, including use by a computer. Anti-terrorism legislation penalizes the offense of terrorism by a terrorist, any means, any manner. Computer Misuse Act provides for a robust methodology. So are we in Trinidad and Tobago talking more so about what we do to create new law, or must the call also include, and this is a call that I now make of my own government, and I am the chief agitator for the solution on this hand, must the call not also include improving the detection, conviction via prosecution under due process in the laws of Trinidad and Tobago being applied, so that people realize that there's a consequence to criminality? Because believe you me, you can achieve any consequence if you apply the methodology through intelligence-driven policing investigation. The Honorable Senator, if you would allow me, as we hear umpteen phones going off in the Senate.
Can I remind everyone that all cell phones should be either turned off or on silent? Oh dear. All right, let me rephrase. All digital devices should be turned off or on silent.
I'm sure that was not an act of cyber terrorism. But suffice it to say, Madam Speaker, Madam President, suffice it to say, I'd like to just stick a pin in the argument for a moment. Having made a call to myself as the Attorney General to enable the laws, to get them moving, bearing in mind politicians, the executive, can only create enabling environments. It is for the prosecutorial and investigative arms to do their work, but they must be operationalized by proper enabling structures, which a government no doubt promotes and provides. But you said something, Honorable Senator, which I wish to assist you with and the country with. You cried out quite legitimately for the need for statistical information. And I was very pleased to receive answer to a request that I made of the Cybercrime Unit. And I'd like to put on record statistics so that we can further stimulate these arguments. So, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Cybercrime Unit for 2015 only dealt with the following types of cases and number of cases. Online identity theft, 15. Online business email fraud, 25. Website compromise, 10. Network intrusion, 7. Social media investigation, 60. Digital forensics, 231. Online open source investigations, 80. SEA laptop recoveries, 12. Child pornography, child exploitation investigations, 8. Online open source investigations, 21. Malware analysis, 8. Cellular triangulation, 450. That's for 1 year only, 2015. I want to drill further down to that and to say that Interpol itself has asked for assistance of our agency in the years 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, jurisdictions including the USA, Germany, Poland, Canada, Malta, and France. And those inquiries related to online child pornography for 2013, 4. Online child pornography from Germany, 2013, 3. Poland, online child pornography, 1. USA, online child pornography, 154 for 2014. 2015, the UK and Germany, again for child pornography, 3 and 1. Canada for 2016, online child pornography, 3. Malta, online fraud, 1. France, online child pornography, 1. And the TTPS Cybercrime Unit has been able to assist significantly there. But where I found very important statistical information, and you will note that the Office of the Attorney General has taken a very different course to the past. We are now putting into the public domain what we uncover by way of statistics, because we genuinely want to invite the population in to participation on the basis of not anecdotal information, but factual information, be it in the prison service, where we disaggregate numbers, or now in this cybercrime and cyberbullying aspect. Cybercrime statistics as it relates to bullying, conducted again by the TTPS in the period 2011 to 2015, there were a total of 142 cases. 14 for 2011, 27 for 2012, 33 for 2013, 36 for 2014, 25 for 2015, 7 for 2016 up to now. The number of cases solved over that period was 90. Leading to a 63.3% conviction or solution rate, which is an incredibly high number. The number of prosecutions arising, which is different from solution, was 30. And the numbers for cases solved against the numbers just given, 2011, 9 of 14, 2012, 17 of 27, 2013, 24 of 33, 2014, 20 of 36, 2015, 17 of 25, 2016, 3 out of 7. Prosecutions, 5, 5, 7, 9, 4, nil. Across the years 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So these are some of the facts. It shows, therefore, that what we have going on is a police service that is clearly doing some serious work, clearly with a 63% solution rate, has some material outcome, clearly with number of prosecutions in tow. What has to happen now is not only prosecution but conviction, but we seem to be headed in the right direction. What seems to be absent from the matrix is the connectivity right now. Because cyberbullying is one aspect of bullying only. What I asked for was what was going on in the schools. And Senator Ramkissoon raised it. She raised the fact of what's going on as actual physical activity. I was astounded to learn that in 2014 alone, some of the statistics look like this for students who were suspended in 2014 alone across the following reasons or categories: assault with weapons and assault without weapons, bullying, disrespectful to authority, extortion, taxing, fighting with weapons, fighting without weapons, gangs, possession of weapons, robbery or theft, sexual misconduct, obscene language, vandalism to schools, disruptive behavior. The total for 2014 alone suspensions was 2,531 students. Disruptive behavior 101, vandalism to school 112, obscene language 87, sexual misconduct 106, robbery or theft 98, possession of weapons 84, fighting 389, fighting with weapons 48, extortion 60, disrespectful to authority 414, bullying 84, assault without weapons 281, assault with weapons 65. That's male alone. I haven't told you about female. Now the total number is 2,531, but it's disaggregated as to male and female, and I just gave you the male disaggregation figures. The female figures are equally frightening. Fighting without weapons 165, sexual misconduct 59, vandalism to schools 25, disruptive behavior 34. So we clearly have an issue, if I put it this way, where we have laws, as I've just identified in the cyber context. We no doubt have laws in the physical context as well, but clearly we have a problem. So, do we throw our arms up in the air? Do we say all is bad? Do we adopt a Hobbesian point of view that life is short, poor, nasty, and brutish? Do we adopt a Rousseau perspective of rose-tinted lenses and that things can be fixed? Or do we come together and recognize, as Senator Ramkissoon has implored this Parliament, and which I approve of wholeheartedly, that we have to take the best chances that we can to do the best effects that we can to get the right results? Because, Honorable Senator, you mentioned something which was very important. You mentioned the fact that we have to deal with the solutions for our children. You said we must legislate against bullying. It's legislated already. The Offences Against the Persons, Section 30, can be applied. Cyberbullying can be applied. The problem is in evidence. And everybody in Trinidad and Tobago knows who did it, how much the thief, who did what. Time to turn up in court to give evidence. Zip! No man jack coming forward. For fear of victimization, for fear of abuse, legitimate fears. So therefore, isn't it a progressive step as your first order of business to make sure you deal with whistleblowing protection as a government? Needless to say, we're in Joint Select Committee right now dealing with that law. Isn't it also useful when you're making a cry in relation to the need to protect children, as the Honourable Senator has implored us? She said to us, the Honourable Senator, that there is a national school code of conduct. Parents need to be held responsible for breach of the code of conduct. I wish to remind that we have a Children's Act 2012, and we've defined the concept of persons with responsibility for the child. And negligence is one of those responsibilities for which you can be made to pay the consequences. But isn't efficiency best demonstrated by enabling a court with specialist skill and specialist ability, properly constructed, where that can happen, where peer resolution as a technique can be applied? And therefore, should we not take conscious reflection of a government that has brought a children and family division bill, which is currently in this Parliament right now, and which will be brought back for completion hopefully by next week, where we took the opportunity as a government to amend 18 pieces of law in one shot. When we could have done it staccato, we decided to bring it together so that we could operationalize the Children's Act 2012 appropriately. You see, the theory of my submission, most respectfully, enough talk about new laws. How about operationalizing the existing laws we have more efficiently? It is for that reason that one must have centricity of focus on intelligence provision to be a supplement to investigative and prosecutorial arms of government, and therefore conscious reflection of putting a priority to improve your strategic services agencies' ability to deal with, and I hope not to intrude here, specifically cybercrime, is of material note, because that's what the new SSA bill focuses on in the definition clause of serious crime, cybercrime. But, Madam President, one must also have conscious reflection of the need for an Official Secrets Act, because you can't create whistleblowing legislation and have a backdoor where people who are obliged to keep national secrets secret disclose them. So, conscious reflection of that kind of law has to be had as well. And what I am hoping to lay as persuasive effort demonstration is that we are not a government bungling from one piece of law to the next, but rather we're a government that has the courage to produce and publish a legislative agenda and to connect the dots on how the laws twine and deal with each other. Because that's the only way that we're going to get this to work, Madam President. Madam President, I know that the speaking time in this House is a little bit different from the House of Representatives, unfortunately. But I wish to turn to another very important tool. May I ask how many more minutes I have left, Madam President?
11.
Thank you very much. So, in 11 minutes, and I hope you're right, Madam. I'm getting expressions of what from my colleagues on my own bench in disbelief that there's that much time left.
Very nice.
Yes, much obliged. So, may I say that there is a very interesting tool to wrap much of this up. And I wish to tell you how we are actually dealing with that. The supreme law of the land in Trinidad and Tobago is, as we all know, the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Republican Constitution. In the Republican Constitution, we have rights enshrined in Part 1 of the Constitution, and Section 4 enshrines the rights to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who, without any discrimination of race, origin, color, religion, or sex, have the following fundamental rights and freedoms. The right to life, liberty, security of the person, enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof except by due process of law. The right of an individual to equality before the law and protection of the law. This one is where I wish to focus. The right of the individual to respect for his private and family life. And then, of course, we go on equal treatment, right to join political parties, the right of a parent or guardian to provide a school of his own choice for education, freedom of movement, freedom of conscience, freedom of belief, observance, freedom of thought and expression, freedom of association and assembly, freedom of the press. Now, I've focused upon these particular rights because these rights intrude upon some of the laws that we have in operation. And so, it's interesting to note that there are basically three categories of things involved in cybercrime. And that is where you have cybercrime that relates to the person, cybercrime that relates to property, and cybercrime that relates to your nation or state. Needless to say, cybercrime relative to nation or state can be viewed as terrorism, as our Anti-Terrorism Act deals with that, hence cyber terrorism. Against the person and property, Computer Misuse Act can deal with property, so too can common law offenses, etc. Also, we have against the person. But there is a very important right, and I say this now to the younger people of Trinidad and Tobago. The right of privacy does not per se exist in our jurisdiction. There is no right of privacy in Trinidad and Tobago. You have the right under the Constitution for private respect of your private life. But I want to commend publicly that there is great enterprise in Trinidad and Tobago to finding protection for privacy. In particular, the issue of confidentiality as it relates to, how should I say, images of explicit content, where those images are created and disclosed in the context of a personal relationship between consenting adults. Those matters of news have come into the public domain. And I want to commend for reading to everyone the High Court action judgment by Mr. Justice Frank C. Prasad in CV 2014-01949, the case of Therese Ho and Lendell Simmons. And in that particular judgment, the learned judge goes through very usefully the law as it relates to confidence. Now, there's a common law right of confidence, where there's a respect for confidentiality, where the material has the nature of confidence, it's disclosed in a confidential setting, and it's understood that way. Protection comes into the common law that way. We have a statutory right of protection that one could argue exists under the Copyright Act, because it criminalizes and treats with civil liability disclosures of things which are copyrighted, and anything that you create in your mind is in fact copyrighted when it's expressed. There's no need for that circle and see. There's no registration requirement for copyrights, and we have it in trademark laws as well. But the learned judge goes through a very useful analysis of the law of equity, and where the law of equity can step in to fill the void in circumstances where there's no contractual relationship of pure confidence. And I want to commend in particular the novelty of the courts of Trinidad and Tobago in applying age-old equitable principles to give compensation by way of aggravated damages and general damages in circumstances of what is now referred to as revenge porn. Because that applies to a number of circumstances where there is a relationship between people, but it doesn't go right and somebody accepts quite inappropriately the wrong course of action. Hence, thank you, Madam President. I'll have to speed it up. So the point is that there is great merit in the novelty of the common law, in the novelty of the equitable jurisdiction of the High Court, and that even though we don't have one standalone piece of law right now which deals with the new offenses of cybercrime, where arguably we have a suite of laws that deal with the old types of crime committed via computers, but not in the best manner of expression where it is conclusively dealt with, where you can find one compendium of laws. I dare to say that it is imperative for us to adopt an holistic approach to finding this solution. I want to say, by way of concluding remarks, that the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is very conscious of the need for the law to be harmonized and modernized. It is for that reason that we have put it at number 3 on the legislative agenda. I again apply the caveat that things may cause a little reshuffling now and then where there are exigencies of emergency to be applied in respect of other laws, but suffice it to say it's top priority. And we've made it top priority by operationalizing the law at the same time while we apply it. And it is for that reason that we have given significant budgetary assistance to the manpower in the judiciary and to the manpower in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and to the investigative arms at the SSA, which are an aid to investigative and prosecutorial services. So, Honorable Senator, final statement, the government is fully committed to supporting and prosecuting an enabling environment to bring to life that desire expressed in your motion, which we are not only promising to do, but which is already published and in the gear to be performed. I thank you, Honorable President.
Senator Samuel.
Madam President, I too want to join through you with the House in welcoming the students of Naparima College. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this motion by Senator Ramkissoon, Melissa Ramkissoon that is, and to share with this Honorable House some views after hearing both the Senator and the Honorable Attorney General, who has always expressed and exhibited not only what I always tease him with his sartorial elegance, but his oratorial elegance, as he always attempts in many instances, Madam President, to expatiate on the legal aspect and the laws in many instances. I must say, though, that after hearing the Attorney General speak, I must, there's something that came to mind, that it is one thing to have all of these things enacted. It's another thing to act upon it in many instances. And we have not been a society over the many years of independence to tremendously act upon those things that have been enacted. And that is where we have suffered in so many instances. But, Madam President, one of the things that we must consider is the fact that there is a basis for all of the things that are happening in our lives. Some things have been happening that triggers off a lot of things that we are experiencing today. So cybercrime and bullying and cyberbullying and stuff like that did not just happen or just come to the forefront overnight. It is something that has evolved, that started at a lower level, that began in a lower phase, that happened at another time in our society. And as life evolved and as things began to expand and as technology increased and would develop even more, what happened is that the bullying mechanisms took a new form. And in taking a new form, the Attorney General is 100% correct when he says legislation didn't take the new forms, as these things were taking new forms in our lives. But it started, and it starts with the status of a society and how a society evolved, how it moved forward, how it developed itself, how discipline and indiscipline affected our lives, and how it affected our lives in the past, and how it grew into different dimensions. So it is not a now thing. It all started with some aspect and some form of indiscipline as adults, as exhibited by adults across the fair. Indiscipline as we see it in our young adults, as it has a domino effect upon society. So it starts with adults, and it triggers itself down to young adults, and then to our teenagers and our children in our schools. So it has a domino effect all the time. That is what we see happening, Madam President. And now we have to deal with what we now term cybercrime and cyberbullying. But it's just bullying of a different nature, bullying in a different form, bullying at a different level, bullying with different technology. Many, many years ago, there might not have been, it might not have been termed cyberbullying because there was no technology then at that time. But it is the same bullying that has been taking place. It's just of a different nature, Madam President. And when we think about it, we recognize that there could not be cyberbullying if there was not bullying in its first phase. At a natural level, in a relational level, one-to-one bullying, bullying in the schools, bullying as adults, bullying in the parliament. And maybe we have to start to think about parliamentary bullying. We may have to think about how we speak to each other, and how we respect each other, and how we sit on sides and talk about, I'm not listening to you, are dotish and you're stupid, and those kinds of bullying mechanisms. Probably we have to look at all these kinds of things to see if it is those things that our children are looking at, and they in turn are now adopting the same bullying mentality that we are facing today. Front page and Express, you dotish, are we not listening to you? You are idiot. I don't listen to all you. And it may be those kinds of things that our children are looking at and listening to, that when they hear it, they say, well, if the priest could play. Who is we? Madam President. It is important for us to look at it, because if we go to the relational issues, and I'm not talking about the personal relationship, face-to-face bullying, that first triggered off the bullying mechanisms, and now we reach to a mechanism that is not a face-to-face mechanism. It's kind of, antisocial. As a matter of fact, we are in a society that's very antisocial. I mean, it's something that is happening in our homes. The children are in one room, texting children in the next room. The family is driving down the road, and the children in the back seat texting the mother in the front seat. So it's an antisocial. So cyberbullying is an antisocial kind of bullying. Because a lot of people can no longer talk face to face. Family life has been destroyed, and now we find that, hey, if I can't bully you personally, I can text you. So it's a reflection, Madam President, of what is taking place in reality in our society. Relationships are gone. Interpersonal relationships are over. And now the crime situation has ended up in an antisocial and impersonal kind of relationship. As a matter of fact, we encourage that. You know, years ago, when you took up the phone and you called, there was a human being on the other side of the line saying hello. You know, so now what you find is a recording that you have. So it's so really everything has become antisocial, impersonal. There is no personal human contact anymore. So cyberbullying has just taken over and taken the thing to another level. And we have to admit that. That's the way we live. That's how we live. That's the conditions under which we operate. And some people just take it to the extreme levels and to the extreme limits. So, Madam President, we've got to understand that, and that so that we are faced with this kind of impersonal interaction on a 24/7 basis. I mean, it is difficult, and I go back to the issue of making a phone call. It's difficult to ask a question because the thing that you're getting on the line does not, you can't respond to a question. Okay? So it's important for us to see where all this antisocial behavior stems from. It's important for us to know that. And so our children, because adults have set those mechanisms in place, are now the recipients of those kinds of things and atmosphere. So we have created an atmosphere for them, and they are now growing up in an atmosphere. What do you expect? The same antisocial, impersonal kind of relationships. And we now call it, they use it to the extent now where it is cybercrime and cyberbullying. Now, Madam President, but as a society, if you walk down the streets and ask 50 persons if they are aware that there's a cybercrime unit in Trinidad and Tobago's police service, they will say, what? So the learned Attorney General talks about, laws, and the TPS have a cybercrime unit and all. The citizens are not aware of those things. Because really, we come in Parliament and we talk all kinds of laws and expatiate and debate and all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the day, the average citizen on the street is none the wiser of a lot of stuff that goes on, a lot of stuff that is said, and the quotation of this law, Lord, and that law, Lord, and all. The man on the street doesn't know that. So we sound good. We sound intelligent. But we don't make sense to the average man on the street. And that now we are facing reality where, Madam President, the bullying situation has shown its ugly face in another dimension. Years ago in school, I mean, you run and you hit your partner a little tap, you run down the road, you tie the little grass in the savannah, and you know where you're running. Your partner, your tap run you down. I mean, the Honorable Minister, you remember that? Am I right? I mean, you know what you tie in the ground, the grass, and you're running through there and you're skipping through, and he's trying to catch you, and he's hooking up in the grass and falling. That's the kind of relationships we had. We had fun, and nobody was trying to brutalize nobody and terrorize nobody, but it has changed. It has changed from the moment adults could no longer relate, and then we find that now the children are unable to relate. And at the end of the day, the psychological trauma that our citizens, and I'm not looking at cybercrime and cyberbullying only from a teenage or a pre-teenage, from that standpoint. I'm looking at it across the board. Because there is bullying in the workplace. There is cyberbullying across the board. And if we are to seriously look at it, then we must look at the cause of the situation in order to find solutions for the situation. What we want in this country are solutions. We want to be able to change the mindsets of people so that people will now begin to have the kind of respect for each other, and that if we have respect for each other, we really wouldn't do the kind of stuff that some people are doing. It is said, Madam President, that children who are at the end of the chain, and I say the end of the chain, not degrading the child, but they are the lowest end of the chain from the standpoint of intellect, experience, and that kind of stuff. They tend to suffer the most from bullying and cyberbullying and all of these things. They tend to suffer the most because they are yet not matured enough to be able to decipher things for themselves and they personalize it. But even teenagers and adults suffer, and they also go through psychological trauma. So a lot of the things that we probably see in schools today, and the violence and the indiscipline and all these kinds of stuff, it could be termed by the psychologists as some kind of psychological situation that is taking place together with all of the madness that's going on otherwise. But it is said by some people who have studied the thing that people who go through cyberbullying and bullying as a whole are more susceptible and likely to become alcoholics and skip school, and they work less and they perform less and stuff like that. They go to work and they go to school, but they don't want to. It's a psychological thing. They perform terribly at school. They perform terribly on the job. Their self-esteem is tremendously low. And it is time for us, Madam President, to begin, because when the Attorney General began to rattle out figures and data, it is reported data. A lot of times in this country, Madam President, we hype up certain aspects of a particular crime, but there are certain aspects of it people don't take on. Let me give you a good example of that. If a woman goes to the police station and reports that she has been molested, raped, or anything, police looking for the man. If a man goes to the police station and reports that he has been raped by a woman or abused, police officer, watching at him and say, "What kind of man you are, boy?" Because they take one aspect far more serious than the other, and we have to agree to that. It's a fact. Okay, so you find that when it comes to cybercrime, police might get serious when there is some corruption or something like that. But when it comes to somebody hacking your mail or cyberbullying, somebody said something online to you and you report it, they might not take it as serious as they would have taken other aspects of it. And as a result of that, a lot of people don't go to the police station and report anything. I've had my mails hacked on numerous occasions, and I didn't go to the police because they would say, "Okay, change your password." That's how they treat you. That's like they will actually tell you that you're wasting our time. We have more serious crime to investigate. You're wasting our time. So the time has come for us to start at the level of the children who have been the effects of the domino effect in the nation, and begin to now collect data in a more clinical way. And the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development will probably need to ask his colleague, the Minister of Education, that they need to now begin to do clinical surveys at our education institutions and begin to now gather data as to the level of bullying there is at our schools. How many people are being bullied? Do surveys at schools and see what the level is. How many children feel that they are constantly being called names and stigmatized in certain ways? And children will tell you in surveys. They will do that. How many of them are subject to rumors? How many children feel that they have been spat upon and tripped willfully, because they are being bullied? How many of them are excluded from activities and they cannot get involved because of the bullying situation? We have to do clinical surveys. How many of them are threatened with harm? You see, they may not go to an adult, they may not go to the police station, but that doesn't mean it's not happening, and you have to find a mechanism to get the kind of data so you have a realistic view as to what is taking place in our society. How many of them are forced to do things that they do not want to do? Those are the kinds of surveys we're talking about. And do surveys at different levels. Do surveys between 12 and 15. Do different aspects of surveys in different categories to see where it is and how bad it is in some age groups, to ensure that we're able to deal with the issues and deal with the situation at the levels it ought to be dealt with. Because we cannot feel that one cap fit all. We do an overall survey and then we can find solutions for it, Madam President. That is an impossibility. It may be that we have to target age groups and begin to survey those age groups and get realistic figures and determine how we are going to approach the issue of bullying and cyberbullying and all of these kinds of things. How many of them in schools have had their school bags destroyed and their books destroyed because of bullies and that? We have to do those clinical surveys to make sure. The question that we must ask is that whether in our schools and whether in our society, it's more prevalent based upon where you come from, which geographic location you live, whether it's a rural or suburban or urban district you live in. You have to figure out where is it prevalent. If people bully you because you're living in what we call the country, or because you're living in town, we have to know all of those data in order to come up with solutions, Madam President. And if we do not, then we're just spinning top in mud. We're going to have laws and we're going to have things enacted, but we will have no action to support it, Madam President. Then we have to figure out where is it taking place? Yeah, it's on the internet, on the phones. Where is it taking place? In the classroom? Is it taking place on the football field? Is it taking place on the corridors? Is it taking place in the cafeterias, in the lunchroom? Where is all this taking place? If we are going to look at this thing, because remember, the children are able to, they are the recipients of it, It's something that is started at a high level that is filtering down in a different form to them. And they might be able to do it face to face, but now that they have phones, they are learning from adults how to do it online. They're learning how to do it online. Maybe it's on the bus. You never know. You never know where it's taking place, and we have to find out. If we do not find out, we are in trouble. Okay? And then we can do the surveys from the children, because many of them are being affected on the internet and through phone calls and through text messages and all kinds of stuff. And the surveys will give you that kind of information. And it's based on that kind of information, you have an overall view of what is taking place nationally, and then you can find solutions for the problem. Madam President, what serious mechanisms have been put in place to report cyberbullying? What serious mechanisms? How does this citizen feel about whatever is there? How does it draw the citizen to want to report it, to want to find a way out of it, to find solutions for it, that they would be excited to put a stop to this thing? What serious mechanism? I am not just talking about laws and enactments and parliament sitting and debating those kinds of stuff. How do we get the society involved in curbing it and in dealing with it when it becomes every citizen's responsibility? It becomes every citizen's responsibility to deal with it. And the legal fraternities and all of the laws and the police service give support. Now, many a times, they ask for the society to give support, but we are asking for them to give support. They must now give support to the society. They must now give support to the citizens. And when the citizen goes to report and goes to the police station and goes to the unit, the citizen must be made to feel as if, hey, you are important and you are an integral part of finding solutions for the society. It must not be that you're walking to make a report and you feel as if you're wasting people's time. They treat you as if you are the cause of the cybercrime. It mustn't be. So in other words, we are now saying that it has to be a reverse order. It must not be that the police is asking the citizens for support. It must be that the citizens are demanding that the police give support. That the police give the kind of support to the society. That's what we're demanding. That is how we have to approach this thing. Because they are there to protect and serve. And they are supposed to serve all of us. Not just serve your tickets and warrants, which they feel is their main duty, you understand? But they have to serve you, and they have to understand the mechanism of service, Madam President, and how important it is to change our society. Madam President, because if that doesn't happen, then the citizenry will be afraid to report it. Far more for children. It is far easier for a child not to report something and keep it in, and keep it among their personal friends, than to go to the law, go to an adult and report it. Why? Because, I mean, if it's happening among adults, where an adult goes to the relevant authorities to report something and he's treated as if he's wasting time, could you imagine how a child would feel? When he feels that he's wasting time, or nothing will come out of that. And there is an old saying in our society that really nothing comes out of anything in the society. So the child feels if I go and tell Miss or I go and tell Sir, nothing will come out of it. There must be a mechanism that makes the child or the citizen feels at ease, that says, hey, I can go and I can feel comfortable that this is going to be taken seriously. There must be a mechanism, Madam President. So if we really examine the issues of bullying and cyberbullying, we probably need, Madam President, to do an entire parliamentary course on how we must talk with each other and relate to each other. Because the children look at the parliamentary channel. And I had a kind of shocking experience today when someone is asked a question and then they attack, blah, 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 you know, and I'm saying, look at that children out in my mind, that children outside there. And the attitude, and I wonder if that wasn't a form of bullying. We say it's parliament and it's under parliamentary privileges, but you know something, we might be kind of terming it wrong. We might be using it under parliamentary privilege, and really it might just be a form of bullying. And in other words, Madam President, if we could bully each other here, I could imagine what could happen when we go back to our ministries and our homes and what we're doing on the job and stuff like that. We have to be very careful, you know, because our children are watching and saying, whoa, if he could answer so I could tell Miss, if you continue, I will put a slap on you, you know. Because the little girls have to Miss, you know, Miss, I feel like just slapping you up. I wonder where she learned that from. I wonder if she's watching us and hearing how we respond to each other. I wonder if she's saying, oh, but if you could answer Senator Mark, so Whoa! Miss can't tell me nothing. You understand? This child can't tell me nothing. We are peers. And if them could deal with their peers at that level that way, then I could deal with my peer at this level that way. I want you to listen to me carefully. I want you I'm serious about this, Madam President. When our children watch us, if we can deal with our peers the way we deal with each other, could you imagine the child sitting at home viewing that? They realize, but it is all perfect and right to deal with each other that way. So when I get to school and there's my peer in school, I can rough him up. And there is no problem with that because it's acceptable at the highest level. So why can't it be accepted? But at school, if the child treats the peer like that, Miss steps in and say, apologize. But at the higher levels, no way. We've got to look at what we are sending down to ensure that we are changing it across the board. Madam President, so in order for us to deal with this, we've got to realize, Madam President, that some time ago, I think it was Simon Tech, that's the people who have been dealing with virus protection, Norton, virus protection. They were asked to do surveys internationally about cyber crimes and stuff like that. And wow, when I was able to just view a little bit of the information, it is said that when it comes to cybercrime totals to about $120 million annually. Billion dollars, sorry. About $120 billion annually. That's a lot. And when you think about it, it is said by some of the reports that some 80 million hacking attacks are conducted daily. On a daily basis, you have 80 million accounts being hacked. That tells you a great deal. So in a little country like ours, where we see a little bit of reporting and stuff like that, it is far more serious than we think it is. Because a lot of times, the citizens do not have the confidence in the agencies to investigate, so they decide they will not investigate. They will not report. And not only that, but Madam President, I want to suggest, that we seriously sit and not just look at legislation and this bill and that bill, but let us begin to look at the social culture of our society. And why is it what it is today? And how can we alter that? What mechanisms can be put in place? Because legislation and laws seem not to be helping that. Because the more laws we create, is the less effective it is in the society. So probably we need to start to think to see what is the social issue, what are the social issues that are affecting our society that we need to work on. What is causing a child, what is causing the adult to be the way they are that has caused the children to be the way they are? Cause and effect, Madam President. And if we do not do that, we will find ourselves in tremendous difficulties. We will have much legislation on the books, much laws enacted, but much more trouble, because to every level, from a religious standpoint, there is another devil. And it's important for us to know that. So while you are looking to enact more laws, the person is intending to break more laws. Because if you cannot deal with the base law, skyrocketing it and adding more stuff to it doesn't make sense, because you're yet to understand the base law and have it effective. And those are the problems that we have in this society. And that is why, Madam President, it is important for us to realize that if we understand where it started and how it has triggered down, we would not have had a lot of the stuff that has taken place even in Parliament and the email gates and the this gates and the that. We would not have had that. And the reason for that is because it all has to do with the way we think. How do we think? And what are we doing at every level to ensure, Madam President, that the next generation, those children that are now at the preschool level, would not have to suffer as those that are in the primary school levels. We have to find a mechanism to shield those preschoolers that are existing now. Because here what will happen. If you feel it's bad now, let them be affected, Madam President. Because to every generation, it gets worse. And I'm not blaming the children. I am not fault-finding them. They are at the most impressionable age in their life. And what is impressing them? You would see that based upon what they are drawn to, what they are involved in. That is what is impressing them. And we've got to now find a mechanism to alter what is impressionable and make sure it impacts upon their lives to change. And Madam President, this issue of cyberbullying, bullying, cybercrime is not a now thing. It's not a new thing. But we have to work together. Not just government and opposition and independents. The whole society. Every individual must begin to feel that I must be a part of the solution. I must be a part of solving this. It is not a political thing. It is not that we enacted legislation and they did not. That doesn't solve the problem. Because from generation to generation, since 1962, laws are enacted, all kind of enactment, and it hasn't solved the problem. So we've got to stop boasting about legislation. We've got to start looking at relations. How are we encouraging relationships among adults, teenagers? Madam President, I was privy to information that a survey that was done on race relations in Trinidad and Tobago. And a private enterprise was commissioned to do the study on race relations in Trinidad and Tobago. And they chose not to do it among adults. So what they did they had a preteen survey, a teenage survey, and a young adult survey. Madam President, at preteens, there's no problem with race. Children relate to each other based on behavior. I don't like her because she taps me, or she takes my pencil, or my pen, or she pushes me down. That's how they do it. Madam President, the moment they hit secondary school, she's black, she's a nigger, she's a coolie, she's a Chinese, she's a this, she's a that. The moment they get to the secondary school level, I have 5 more minutes, ma'am.
You have 5 more minutes, Senator. Could you desist from using those expressions in the chamber?
I will desist.
It is unparliamentary, and really let us modify the language. Okay,
Okay, ma'am. She is not of the same ethnic origin. So she is of a clearer ethnic origin. He is of a darker ethnic origin. She is from a straight hair origin, and she is from a kinky haired origin. Half a dozen of one, the other. It happens, and sometimes it's being used across the board, but we're afraid to face it. So at teenage levels, Madam President, wow, it shows its ugly face. At young adults, whoa, it's bad. Where are they getting it from? It has to be coming from above. And I believe it is important for all of us to start to look at what the adults in our society are doing, what we are giving off, what's the learning curve for the society as the adults. And if we do not do that, before long, Senator Ramkissoon, there'll be another name. It will not be cyberbullying. It will get so bad, they will have to find a new definition for it. Because cyberbullying is because of the technological age. It's going to reach a point that it's beyond technology if we are not careful. So we've got to sit back and look carefully at the reality that it didn't start just so. It started somewhere. Now it's hit the children. It's going to now reach another dimension in our society, Madam President, and if we are not careful, we will not be able to deal with it in generations to come. I want to say I commend the Senator for moving this motion. It's a serious thing. It's more serious than probably you think it is. It's more dangerous than we think it is. Legislation and thing doesn't literally deal with it. Because we have a lot of that. Making of much books, there is no end. Much studies are weariness of the flesh, one writer says. Okay? So really, it is, we have to find solutions that will deal with the social issue. And when we deal with the social issue, we will solve a great deal of the legal issues. Madam President, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. I pray that I did not abuse anything, but I was just speaking based on the report. Okay? So I want to thank you.
Senator Chote.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to commend my fellow sister senator for bringing this motion to the Senate's attention. And she deserves a special commendation because all the attempts thus far to have legislation enacted in our country to deal with cybercrime have failed. We had the Computer Misuse Act, I believe it was, of 2000. Well, unfortunately, in all my years of practice, I have not heard of one prosecution under that act, nor have I heard of any way in which it was used. The Offences Against the Persons Act, which allows someone to go to the police and to say that he or she has been harassed by someone using a computer, carries the fine, the awesome fine of 2,000 TT dollars or 6 months simple imprisonment. So it stands to reason that when a police station, which is probably understaffed and overworked, gets a complaint like that, it's not going to be at the top of their list. It is going to be at the top of the list for the person who is being harassed. And that person may not only be the teenager in the high school, that person may be the woman in the home who is being abused, that person may be two persons going through a divorce and exchanging hostilities over property and children. That person may be someone in the workplace who is being sexually harassed. And unfortunately, the laws which we have do not address these real human issues which many of our citizens face every day. Now, I actually had an experience with someone trying to get the Offences Against the Persons Act, that section, to work. young lady coming out of a relationship, young man can't seem to understand that he is no longer needed around. Hundreds of texts, hundreds of emails from servers all over the world. This poor girl took it on for as long as she could and then went to the police. Well, yes, we do have a cybercrime unit in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, but you can't make a report to the cybercrime unit. You have to go and make a report either to the fraud squad or to the police station in your district and hope that the person who takes your report then sends it to the cybercrime unit. Now, we have heard statistics about how many matters this unit has investigated. Well, I don't know what was the outcome of that. Were these matters successfully investigated, brought to the courts? Were persons prosecuted as a result? We simply do not know. So this young woman tried to get protection under the domestic violence laws. And that proved to be difficult because the courts were a little concerned about how you can use computer information and whether it was admissible and whether she can prove that it came from him and that kind of thing. So we thought, well, why not go for this offense against the Offences Against the Persons Act? That went absolutely nowhere. After several calls to the police station, the police officers, who were helpful, they did go and try to warn the young man and so on, told me, well, ma'am, you have to understand, there's only so much hours in the day that we have. So we can't, try to track him down from home to work to his mother's house and so on. So that's all that we can do. We've given him a warning, but we are not going to prosecute him for these offenses. So nothing came of that. So I was looking at the institutional memory of this Honorable House, and I saw that there were 2 bills in 2014 which were brought before the Parliament. Now, I know that the Honorable Attorney General has said that there is going to be legislation soon, but we are already in the month of April, almost at the end of April, and the parliamentary term is going to come to a close shortly. So it certainly looks as though if legislation is to be brought to deal with this kind of situation, it's not going to happen anytime soon. I think what I could suggest in the meantime is perhaps, through you, Madam President, to suggest to the Honorable Attorney General that maybe some amendments could be made to the Domestic Violence Act, perhaps even to the Offences Against the Persons Act, to deal with these immediate and pressing problems faced by many members of our society. Now, when I was doing my research into cybercrime, I started to feel at some point, as I imagine Keanu Reeves in the movie The Matrix felt, when all these bullets came at him, and he had to move very quickly to try to see where they were coming from. Because it is an enormous area, I think we must understand that there is no way that legislation is going to address all of the ills created by the abuse of computers. So we have to pluck out what is important. So we have some already. We have the bullying, we have the domestic violence, we have the harassment in the workplace. We have another big problem, and that is the part of it which causes economic loss. Now, I also know of an instance where a certain bank was changing its something in its computer systems, and some criminal gang got wind of it and went around the country and withdrew several $100,000 of people's money. And what became of that was that the police officers called in the bank security. It appears as though that money was never photographed. The notes were never written down anywhere. The money had to be counted by a checking machine from the bank. I think it came up to something like $900,000. By the time 4 people came before the court, I would say at least 1/3 of that could not be accounted for. It is not surprising, therefore, that of the 4 people charged, 2 got bail, managed to get on a plane to England. They were sent back, managed to escape from the airport in a bizarre, I have to say, in an extremely bizarre incident. And when I go on social media now, I see that these persons are living happily abroad. So nobody was held accountable for the loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars of people's money. And that surely has to be wrong. So initially, when I started learning about financial crime, I was looking at cyber fraud, stealing, phishing. I also encountered a situation where an attorney took a client's check and tried to create a false check and gave it to the client, pretending that this was actually a check.
Wow.
This happened. I stand before you and say that it floored me when I realized that people could be so bold-faced, but it happens. So this was created by misuse of a computer, and these are the kinds of situations that the average citizen has to confront and deal with every day. Now, there are larger issues. People talk about, generally speaking, well, why do people turn to crime and so on? And we have loads of studies dealing with that. But I didn't find very much in terms of why do computers have such a hold on the minds of young people? Because what we are seeing is that gamers are becoming gamblers. And young people feel that it's okay to say things online and put up pictures online because it's an object away from them, disconnected with them. So they feel no responsibility. They feel divorced from their activity. They think it's just the machine. So we need to know, essentially, what is going wrong. How can we teach young people to appreciate that this is a machine just like any other? And you have to understand that there are good things that you can do with it, and there are ways in which you can misuse it. And if you misuse it, you will suffer consequences. Now, I realize that when I started in this Senate, I had to step up my game a bit. So I started listening to what Senator Small was reading and trying to read the same things. And in this case, it took me to a very interesting article in the Bloomberg Business Week of, I think, the 31st of March 2016.
What's your advice then? That's what we didn't know, Bloomberg Business Week.
I can't read the abbreviations. I don't know what the abbreviations mean. But there was an article by three gentlemen, Robertson, Riley, and Wilson, I believe. And this part of it was extremely interesting. And this is a whole different kind of cybercrime. Talks about this man who is now in custody, serving a term for having committed various offenses relating to misuse of computers and computer software and computer networks. He had a career which spanned 9 countries, one of which is very close to us: Nicaragua, Panama, Honduras, El Salvador, Colombia, Mexico, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and very close to home, Venezuela. And he is serving a term because for about 10 years, he was part of a high-flying professional firm hired to work for elections, to steal campaign strategies, to manipulate social media, to create false waves of enthusiasm and or derision, to install and use spyware. And it is, I strongly recommend, senators, that you should have a read of this article. I recommend it through Madam President, of course, because it shows you how sophisticated election crimes can be. And when one looks to what's happening on a certain continent to the north of us, it probably gives you some answers for what we see on the media as they approach their election. But it's very interesting. It just shows us that in this fight against cybercrime, we have to identify, I suppose, the groups of difficulties that we are addressing. And don't wait to try to do it all. You can protect people by making small changes in the law, small amendments. So if Honorable Attorney General wishes to have the whistleblower legislation in first, well, fine, but in the meantime, the Domestic Violence Act could be amended, as could the Offences Against the Persons Act. So I would respectfully suggest that this is the way, perhaps, that we can look at it. And I also respectfully suggest that in the schools, counselors could perhaps collect statistics with respect to how many incidents in the school relate to misuse of a computer or a computer network. And then we would have an idea of how grave the problem is, what the problem is, and how it could be addressed. So, Madam President, I know that we have a certain number of minutes to speak, but I do not wish to speak for all of my time if I believe that I've made all the points that I'm here to make. I commend my sister. I'm very proud to sit next to her. And it has been extremely courageous of her to bring this motion before the Senate. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Ramkissoon.
Thank you, Madam President. I must say I thoroughly enjoyed the debates today. It really was what I expected and more. And I will try to touch on each speaker that we had today. And should I start with the last first? All right, I will start with my bench first. And I must say I strongly support Senator Chote's plea for the amendment of legislation existing. Because we do have the Misuse Computer Act, and I did even look at the section 30.1, which spoke about the harassment. But it didn't really, I saw a case similar to that, where this person was harassing a young lady to the point where he actually registered vehicles in her name and actually got parking tickets. And every minute the police would have to come to her door asking her to summon her to court because of these parking tickets in her name. So it's real, it exists. Cyber crimes is limitless, unfortunately, because how your mind can think. And yes, I spoke about cyberbullying and cyber terrorism, and Sophia spoke about catfishing and fraud. And it's true that unfortunately we can't use our 40 minutes to speak about every single type of cyber crime. And it is for us to predict now what will be coming in the future, as Senator Samuel said, because it's not only existing today or it has existed yesterday. It's something that is evolving with time. And with time, unfortunately, technology is advancing and people are getting smarter by the moment. I didn't even know that gamers were addicted to gambling and had gambling issues. I didn't even know that. So I do support the amendment of legislation because that is definitely an interim stage that we can do as a parliament. I do also cry out for the changing of the system for reporting crimes to the cyber unit. It is very unfortunate to have to go to the police station to report a crime and then they're not being physically equipped to take your statement or even refer you to the cybercrime, because I mean they may not even know what is the credential. So we need to close that gap. If it does exist, it definitely needs to be closed. I do support Senator Samuel's statement. It is not a political issue. It is definitely something that is plaguing Trinidad and Tobago, and unfortunately it is here, Madam President. It is not like it's something that we need to think of. It exists in Trinidad and Tobago and we need to address it now. How we look at now would be an issue because we are coming to a close of our sitting sessions and we do start off with the next session, and we already have legislation to look at and debates already penciled in. So it really is to see how best we can set our time and really address the needs of our nation. Cybercrime is an evolved form of violence from what we have been faced with. And it is important to note that there will be fake accounts created by persons. How we deal with that is definitely going to be in the regulations. Enforcing that regulation is another challenge the law will have to be placed in. And as I said before, we need to give the authority to the courts to prevent such irresponsibility and abuse of digital technology. I heard of the statistics posed by the Honorable Attorney General, and it was very helpful to get that information, with offenses totaling to approximately 927 offenses just in 2015. If that doesn't say how important cybercrime is to us, I don't know what else will. It was great to see the statistics because it's not available in the public, because I tried and I wasn't able to find all the information. So it will be noteworthy because we do have the Children's Authority in place. If they are there, I spoke about the counseling before. If it is that they can record their own statistics to see, okay, we dealt with 10 cases and 5 was resolved, or we had 5 repeat offenders, because unfortunately we have repeat offenders of counseling. I couldn't even believe that when I was doing my research. So something is not working, we are at a disconnect, and we really need to close the gaps. So it is a challenge, and we are here to put our ideas and give forward our thoughts and get a think tank happening to ensure that we have proper legislation in place, that we can serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because they are the ones who are facing the harassment, abuse. And we also have that case too, but I said we are stronger, so we're somehow able to be strong enough to get out of it. But not everybody feels so empowered or feel that they could come out, and they are unfortunately turning to things like suicide and hopelessness, and that's very, very sad. And I don't think that we should sit here knowing that that is a real threat to our society. The Attorney General spoke about operationalizing. I look forward to seeing that bill and having that debate on Tuesday, and I guess we will deal with that then. And he spoke about the Property Act with looking at the Misuse Act. I did look at the Misuse Act of the Computers Act, and it is very broad. And sometimes it might be left to the interpretation of the judge that you may be before. So it may be important to know that when you're writing a legislation, what you need to close and narrow down for specifics to make sure somebody doesn't get fined $500 and versus something like $10,000. So we'll have commercial fraud as well. So I didn't speak about all of that, but all of that exists. And it is true that social media has reformed our thinking. We no longer interact the same way. We no longer use the same parts of communication. And it is important to note that because of this cry for social media to fit in, and we promote these things like selfies. I actually saw this article about if you post 10 pictures a day, you're addicted to selfies or something like that. So, I mean, they're making names of these things. So we, Parliament, need to evolve and need to be aware of where our country is going. We can't only be like, this is what is happening now. We need to be aware and connected. Sometimes our connection with the society is not always there. So I do cry for the specific attention to ensure that there's not a degeneration of our society because of the way we are going forward. It is a lot to ask about laws, because laws are like rules to which we live, and we're trying to kind of make it a moral and ethic issue. So it is going to be challenging, but we should not have that as an excuse to say where the law is failing us. We shouldn't have that as an excuse as not amending our laws to address the present issues of today. So, Madam President, it was great to actually raise my first private motion in this honorable House. And I do appreciate all the feedback I got from all members who were able to debate this motion. And I look forward to it being a real document, a bill where we could actually use. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, the question is, be it resolved that the Senate call upon the government to quickly close the gaps in our legislation in relation to penalties for the abuse and negative usage of computers, mobile devices, and internet technology. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Okay. Honorable Senators, at this juncture, we will take the tea break, and we will return at 5 p.m. So this... Oh, let me backtrack. Honorable Senators, the motion has been carried. All right? And we will now take the tea break, and we will come back at 5 p.m.
Follow the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on Twitter. Our call sign is @TTParliament.